Today's webinar is all about Morocco, what we're calling Land of Enchantments. We're heading there in November of next year. I'll just indulge those who are regulars on our webinars and share with you a little bit about Wheel and Anchor. The vision when we started this community a couple of years ago was all about bringing travelers together. And the one thing I've been working with different travel companies for the better part of more than 30 years, and I've traveled with people from all across the country. And it's always a pleasure to travel with Canadians in other parts of the world. I just feel much more relaxed than most other people do, and particularly if you've had the experience of traveling with folks from other nationalities. I mean, you always meet friends and lovely people, but there's something about the way that we look at things and the way that we, for those of you who are new, you might have read our Traveler's Creed recently, and it's about sort of coming and being respectful of the environment and of the people and being there to learn and be gracious and all those things. And it's those attributes that we share and that we as a all Canadian company and having almost exclusively, we have a few friends from the States that join us on our trips, but mostly it's only Canadians. And we bring everybody together. We have a marvelous time doing it. And in the process of that, my philosophy is to get people more well-traveled. I'm not even sure that's a correct way of saying things, but to be able to really get to know places around the world and the people that you travel with. And it's just such an enriching part of life. And those of us that are fortunate to do it. That's what I'm here to do. That's my life mission. So joining me today, actually, Paula is not joining us today for the first time. Her plate is rather full, so she excuses herself, but says hello to everybody. But Barb is with us today, our other senior trip specialist, who is on the other end of the phone if you're calling to inquire about any of our programs. And I regret that Jawad from Morocco, whom I know, he was supposed to be joining us today, but he's actually on holiday in Europe with his family. So he sends his regrets. He called me about an hour ago. He's indisposed and is not able to make it. So we're going to carry on without him, but he says hello and encouraged me to share all of my thoughts about Morocco, which is what I'm going to do. So today's agenda, as per usual, we're going to show you a little bit around this curious country that, most people haven't heard a lot of. I mean, it's right up there in the Northwestern. It's about as close to Canada in Africa, the closest country that there is. And yet we don't generally know a lot about it. So I'm going to take you on a little journey around the country where we're headed next year. And so let's get started. Now, the first thing is we normally have a very good detailed map of Morocco, but as we were pulling all this together, we realized our map maker went on holiday for a couple of weeks. So we will have a proper one of our usual Wheel and Anchor maps for you in due course. But this gives you at least a little bit of an outline of the country. Of course, as you know, on the northwestern tip of Africa, to the north, you have the Strait of Gibraltar and, of course, the Mediterranean Sea and the Atlantic Ocean to the west. We start our program in Casablanca. It is the largest city in Morocco, and it is the easiest air route from Canada. In fact, there are nonstop flights from Montreal to Casablanca on Air Canada. And various other connections that you can take through Europe if you don't go that way. So we'll begin and end in Casablanca. We'll first head north up to Tangier, which is, of course, basically on the Strait of Gibraltar. This is an amazing city. This is really the crossroads between Europe and Africa, major trading point, as you can imagine. From there, we'll head down to the southeast over the Rif Mountains, heading to Fez. Which again is a city that you might have heard of it before, but it is truly remarkable and very underrated compared to Marrakech, where we're going to end up. From Fez, we go more or less straight south. We're going to hit the Sahara Desert and then cross up over the Atlas Mountains and culminate our journey in Marrakech, which is all of its reputation and then some. An amazing place. That's where I spent my time in Morocco previously, and I absolutely adored it. And I'm sure you will too. So let's look at the program day by day. As I say, the first day we're going to arrive into Casablanca. You'll fly there from Canada. and actually the Air Canada flight arrives bright and early in the morning. There are other connections if you don't want to fly through Montreal. If you're coming from Western Canada, there's other ways to get there. We obviously assist you in finding the best way to get to Casablanca. Regardless, we'll pick you up. And because of the usual jet lag crossing the Atlantic, we haven't got a lot planned for the first night other than to have a bit of a relaxing afternoon, a bit of walking around. Casablanca is a big city. And of course, we all know what Humphrey Bogart and so on and so forth. Actually, it's not that interesting from a tourism standpoint. So we spend the first night and the last night there. We will take in a couple of the sites, but it's kind of not the place you want to hang around and walk around in. It's not that interesting of a city in a broader sense. A lot of people are sort of surprised by that because it's sort of like Casablanca is synonymous with Morocco. And yet as a large city, it's not super interesting. So we don't dwell on it. We have a lovely riad that we're going to stay in. I'll share with you those as we go through. But so we'll on either the first day when we get there or on the last day when we return, we're definitely going to visit the Hassan II Mosque, which is the second largest mosque in Africa. It is quite an architectural statement. Well, you can imagine if you've been to some of the larger mosques around, they are absolutely incredible pieces of design, and this one is certainly no different. So that is one of the things that there is to see in Casablanca, and we'll definitely take it in. But we're going to head up north to a little sort of a peninsula that's at the northwestern tip of Morocco, a place called Asila. This is, as the caption says here, it's a hangout for the world artists, like a little artist colony. They have frescoed walls throughout the city. And we're just going to make a stop here for part of the day, enjoy lunch overlooking the seashore. And again, it'll give you a bit of a different sense of these smaller towns in Morocco. And being in the north, again, the proximity to Europe, you have a lot of influences from Andalusia. And Andalusia is, commonly associated with southern part of Spain, the Iberian Peninsula, but it actually extends technically into northern part of Africa, this part of Morocco. And so we'll get a little bit of a feel for that as we head up to Tangier, which is a very large city at the western edge of the Strait of Gibraltar. It's in fact one of the oldest cities in Morocco, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that as I talk about Tangier. The accommodation that we're staying in for the most part on this trip is in the riads, and it's interesting because I was having a discussion with our partners with Jawad the other day, and typically a lot of people go to Morocco and stay in the usual hotels. And I'm like, no. If you go to Morocco, you have to stay in a riad. Now, what is a riad? A riad is a traditional form of architecture, typically more for the well-heeled, for the wealthier class. So they're like mansions, quite large homes that are typically square or at the most rectangular in nature around a courtyard, usually 2 stories, sometimes 3, with, in the case of the picture that you see here, it's got closed hallways, but often they have open hallways. And so these are traditional homes, again, for the sort of the upper class in Morocco. But in the last few decades, a lot of them have been transformed into guest house or hotel style accommodation. And so as far as I'm concerned, if you travel in Morocco, you kind of have to stay in a riad because to stay in a regular hotel, it just doesn't give you the feel of being there. And you get a sense from these photos here what the architecture is like. These bay window, these balconies with, the Arabic Gothic arches on them. And, the adobe style, which is, of course, throughout Morocco because of the hot weather in the summertime. Open concept seating areas like this with these sort of beanbag type things. This is a riad that is a little bit more on the countryside. The mosaic tile work, it just oozes with, you just feel like you're in Morocco. So we've selected some riads to stay in throughout the trip. And because, as I say, I think that's a really important part of the experience of being in Morocco. We're going to spend a day exploring Tangier. It's actually one of the oldest cities in Morocco, at about 2,500 years old. And interestingly, it actually is the home of tangerines. That's partly where the name of tangerine comes from. So one of the big export products from this part of Morocco is that. And the other thing that I find interesting about Tangier, because you find a great dichotomy of cultures there, because again, where it's located, this is the closest point where Africa is to Europe. And so, there's a lot of traffic back and forth, and a lot of migrant traffic, as you will be familiar with from events of recent years. And so, Tangier has really a lot of culture, a lot of history, and again, it's all what I find. It's all in the people, and it's a terrific city for walking around, as all of the cities that we're stopping in. But the other thing that makes it famous is one of my favorite things about Morocco is Moroccan mint tea, and if you've probably never had a true Moroccan mint tea, you might have bought a tea bag called that. But I remember my first experience in Morocco and sitting down at the hotel, and they made this huge deal out of pouring tea from a beautiful silver teapot, and they pour it in a way, from about a meter above the table, and the tea pours down, and it's absolutely delicious. And it comes originally from Tangier. And I can assure you that we're going to be making sure that you get many opportunities to have the Moroccan mint tea served in the traditional way from Tangier. It's a lot of fun. After Tangier, our trip takes us again down to the southeast. So we're now heading towards Fez. On the way, we're going to stop at a very traditional Andalusian town called Chefchaouen. And this town is here. The picture actually is terrific, because the whole town is blue and white. So you'll kind of like do this and you'll think, am I in Greece? Because it has that charm. But at the same time, the Arabic sort of influences are clear here. And this town is part of an area called the Rif Mountains. There's two main mountain ranges in Morocco. One runs sort of east to west along the north. That's the Rif Mountains, where Tangier is at the western end of those, and Chefchaouen also more on the western side. And then the Atlas Mountains that we'll hit later. They're not connected. These mountains here, where Chefchaouen is, are actually connected more with mountains in the southern part of Spain. So we'll spend some time there. On the way, we'll arrive into Fez later on in the afternoon. We get 2 full days in Fez, which is great, because once again, this is the town that is probably the most how shall we say, it deserves more attention and more time than it actually gets, because of course, when you think about Morocco, everybody heads for Marrakech. And it is an amazing town, but Fez is the one that I think is really worthy of spending that extra day. And so we are actually going to do that. The Medina in Fez, and a Medina, by the way, so you'll hear terms like Medina, Casbah. These are classic terms used in not just in Morocco, but in different parts of the Arabic world, particularly in Western Africa. The Medina is like the old town. So it's very narrow streets. You generally won't find any cars. And so the central part of the town, the part that's most interesting for walking around, and souks and markets and all the rest of that, is the Medina. And the Medina in Fez is actually one of the largest urban centers that is completely car free, partly because you simply couldn't fit a car down the road. So this is where you really feel like you're in an ancient African trading post, because there's donkeys and people and carts and all around, going around in this Medina. The feeling of it is truly amazing. It's what makes Fez particularly special, because although it's touristy, it's not nearly as much as Marrakech, and so that feeling is even greater than you have in Marrakech. We'll have lunch with a local family right in the Medina. So again, you're going to get a sense of what life is like in a place like Fez. And I designed the itinerary like I do in a lot of cases to give you a whole free day here, because there is so much to experience just by walking around on your own. The tanneries that are there are very famous, the copper makers. So they have all kinds of crafts, local things that are produced in the way they've been doing them for generations. And again, this is what makes a place like Fez so interesting is, the touristy stops that we'll see anyway on our sightseeing, but the chance to wander around through this, idyllic is the wrong word. It's a very unique city. And as I say, I'm sure you're going to enjoy it. From Fez, we then start to head back west. So we're going to head in the direction generally of west-southwest, and we are going to hit the Sahara Desert. And of course, this is a highlight for many people because there's not many places in Africa where you would want to go where the Sahara Desert is, because let's face it, the Sahara Desert being the largest hot desert in the world, it's, believe it or not, almost the size of Canada. It's over 9 million square kilometers. So you imagine the size of just sand. But it's a big draw for people. And frankly, I find there is a lot of energy, a lot of peace in the desert. And so spending a couple of nights here will undoubtedly be something you remember for a long time. We have chosen together with Jawad and his team to stay in Merzouga at a wonderful luxury tented resort that you can see here pictured. And this is something very, very special, because when you're out here in the desert, you've got each room is a dedicated tent. It looks from the outside pretty bare bones, but they set out a wonderful dining room table outside or inside, as the case may be. But you just get a sense of it from these pictures, right? We're going to have a sumptuous meal, Moroccan dishes served by really, really lovely staff. And it's the quietness and the solitude. I mean, there's nothing like before, retreating to your tent, going out to the desert and just listening to this silence. It is truly magnificent. Of course, we'll have a little bit of entertainment as well to break the silence before all of that. But I can tell you, staying out here, enjoying one of this sumptuous accommodation, knowing that you are surrounded by sand dunes everywhere, is going to be an amazing experience. So Merzouga will be again a highlight of the trip for sure. And talking about the Sahara, we're going to spend a full day out. We'll do a camel ride for those that wish. We'll head up to and I've just forgotten the name of it, to one of the highest sand dunes in the area, which is actually like 300 meters high. And for those that are intrepid, you can actually walk up to the top of this high sand dune and see all the other millions of sand dunes. We'll do a 4-wheel drive, sort of adventure safari through the desert. And your relationship to it all will change quite a bit, I think, after spending a couple of days there. We'll leave Merzouga after 2 nights, and again continue our way west, making our way in the direction of Marrakech, stopping along the way in the Tadra Gorge. So this is the other major geological formation if you will, in Morocco, is the Atlas Mountains. So you have the plains that are along the Atlantic coast, you have the Atlas Mountains, you have the Sahara Desert. That is what how the country is broken up in the southern half in any event. The Tadra Gorge, with cliffs that are as much as 400 meters in height, is one of the most amazing things to see, because in some ways you'll look at it and you'll think, well, it just looks like the Grand Canyon. And in many ways it is, because it's surrounded by desert. But because you're in these very high mountains, it gives it a different sort of a dynamic, and it's very stark. It's all rock. So it's kind of like a moonscape almost. And so, as I say, we'll stop in at Tadra Gorge, and also at a place called Ouarzazate, which is a picturesque town in another Casbah. Casbah means fortress, and we'll stop in there on the way to Bulmanidades. We have to make an overnight on the way to Marrakech. It's a bit too far to go in one day, but we'll overnight there. And before we get into Marrakech itself, we'll stop at this incredible Casbah. So again, a Casbah is a fortress. So Medina is an old town, a Casbah is a fortress. So you get a little bit of the terminology. And this adobe town or fortress, again, dates back a few hundred years, set in with the Atlas Mountains as a backdrop. Truly spectacular, and a great little town to stop in for lunch, to poke around. As I say, before we get into Marrakech, we'll arrive in that evening. We will check into our riad. So once again, we're staying in a riad in Marrakech that is in close proximity to the main souk. And as well as to all the other things that you want to see. Marrakech is very much a walking city. So, there you can walk for days and days through the markets, through the new part of town, as well as through the old part of town. I had a grand time. I think I was there for a week, and I feel like I barely scratched the surface. While in Marrakech, we'll obviously visit the souks. We may take part in some sort of witnessing how some of the handicrafts are made. Everything here, again, this is the beauty of this part of Africa, is that it's like everything is locally made. You don't find these, Chinese souvenir stuff everywhere, but rather these traditions, these crafts have been handed down from generation to generation. And so we have a number of things, and it's all listed in the itinerary. I'm not going to go through that in great detail, but we want to give you an experience inside the city, but also outside the city by doing it's a good chunk of the day. I think it's about 6 hours. We're going to do a cooking class at a local farmhouse to learn about some of these traditional dishes. And the pot that you see there is actually called a tagine. You'll see a lot of them in the pictures, this triangular shaped ceramic pot. And if you've ever had a tagine before, and I know that often members, you go to foreign countries and then you read about a dish you've never heard of before, or you maybe even went to a Moroccan restaurant in Toronto. But if you've ever had a tagine, particularly a lemon chicken tagine, oh God, it is to die for. And so this will probably be one of the dishes that we learn how to prepare at this cooking class. And, like is common around the world, it's all farm to table, it's local produce, it's local meats. Everything that they prepare there is truly first class, and you'll have a great memory of it. We have, again, allocated an entire free day. Here you can see the tagine pots. You'll want to bring one home with you, but it's not a good idea. They're too heavy for your luggage, but they do look pretty spectacular. And so there will be a day to just wander the city. Obviously, your host will be there and our local guide to sort of point you in the right direction. What should I see next? There's a terrific women's museum. Their Sidi Ganhem is an industrial part of the town, so it's sort of a gentrified area of town where you find all manner of goods. Perfect timing in the month before Christmas, because you can certainly find some interesting and unique stuff to take home to the kids and grandkids. So that will wrap up our trip from Marrakech. We'll then head back to Casablanca. I forgot to mention, actually, on the way out from Casablanca up to Tangier, again, another interesting fact is I decided we're going to take the train. And the interesting thing is that Morocco is the only country in Africa that has high-speed trains, which are very similar. In fact, I think they're built by Alstom, the same company as in France. They're very similar to the TGV in France. So we'll travel at 260 kilometers an hour from Casablanca up to Tangier. And that'll be an experience of itself, because you don't expect that in a country like Morocco, but they do have quite the infrastructure. And here again is a picture of that Hassan II Mosque in Casablanca. that we will either see on the way out or on the last day of our trip when we return in. And it is quite a monument. You can see the sort of the skyline of the city in the background, and definitely worth visiting. So, and we'll have one final night in Casablanca to be able to make our flights back to Toronto. And overall, it'll be a marvelous 2 weeks. I'll give you a few of the details, but most of it will be in the brochure that you're going to get along with a copy of the replay of this webinar. So it's going to come out tomorrow. The program, I think I used as sharp a pen as I could to get the pricing in to be pretty good, I think. So it's just under 6,000 for double occupancy for those 2 weeks in Morocco, staying at really some lovely accommodation and having some experiences that you just don't find everywhere. So here, the summary of what's included, all the accommodation in the riads. In some cases, in 1 or 2 cases, we do have hotels just because there weren't riads that were of sufficient quality. The luxury camp, a host throughout, and we've got sporadically lunches and dinners. The meals in Morocco are, like so many places it seems, they are extravagant. So 2 meals a day, breakfast and one other one, is generally enough for everybody. Otherwise, there's street food everywhere that is available. So the only thing really left out here is airfare, which again, we can facilitate for you, and travel insurance, which is really important. As I mentioned, there is a nonstop flight from Montreal to Casablanca. And you might wonder why Montreal, but of course, Morocco is French influence. It was a French colony for a long time. And so the language in Morocco is Arabic, obviously, and French. French is widely spoken, and of course, English in the touristy towns as well. So again, that's something that not a lot of people are necessarily aware of. Now is the time for any questions. And so I'm going to check, and I see a few questions have come in, but of course, if anything crops up that you wonder after the webinar, then please do drop us a note. I'd be pleased to get the questions, and I will try to answer the questions now. Is it safe to, so Belinda asks, is it safe to travel to Morocco? Canadian travel advisory state exercise a high degree of caution, etc. And how do we deal with such a threat? Good question, Belinda. Well, if you look at the list of countries that Canada puts high degrees of caution on, it's 3/4 of the countries in the world. And so I think that you have to take the wording with a bit of a grain of salt. Is Morocco safe? Absolutely. We wouldn't go if it wasn't safe. I think that the main threats that exist in Morocco that sort of come and go is they occasionally have terrorism. Although, again, what specifically does that mean? It's typically very domestic and geared at internally. So there hasn't been an incident involving tourists in a long, long time that I'm aware of. It is, as I say, it is overall very safe to visit. You can expect, well, I think you have to expect that, like any city anywhere in the world, petty crime does exist. There are pickpockets, so things, snatch and grab type thing, that does happen. But it really, really is very seldom. And so I certainly respect the travel advisories that are in place. But we aren't going to any places that that are going to put us any kind of threat. So that's how we deal with it. We just don't go to any places. It's why we don't also spend a lot of time in places like Casablanca, because of being the largest city. It is a little more dangerous than other places, but there's also no really good reason to stay there. The most tourist frequent places in the country, which is where we're going, again, are very safe, and they're very frequented by travelers. And we don't take any chances. I mean, that's the bottom line. We always travel with locals, and they are always apprised on the situation. And we've never had an issue. So thank you for asking the question. But as I say, if it weren't safe enough for us to go, I can tell you, certainly would not be going. Okay, a couple other questions have come in here. Is there a trip that could go in tandem with this trip? So Jean asks, is there a trip to go in tandem with this trip? Not offhand, Jean. I mean, I always do keep that in mind because we try to pair our trips up. So people like to travel over to the Atlantic once, and sort of not go back and forth all the time. But realistically, in that part of Africa, there's no other countries in the immediate vicinity that I would want. Talking about safety, Algeria, Mauritania, the rest of Western Africa, for the most part, not so much. So I don't have anything to go in tandem with it at this time, but if we think of something that makes sense, we'll certainly add it on. But I think Morocco is pretty much one that we're going to do in and of itself. Are we planning on running the trip again in the fall of 2024? I would say there's a good chance that we are, and I know that a lot of our members are already booked for various things in 2023 with us and with others. So our goal is the most popular trips we will run again and again, because I know that everybody, not everybody, but people are like, well, I want to do that. You can't do everything. So yes, the plan is to do it again. Ingrid asks, how physically able do you have to be to do this? This is not a super strenuous trip in the sense of long hikes or anything like that. I will say that the Medinas in these towns, there is only walking. I mean, there's literally, in Fez, for example, there are no cars at all, or for all intents and purposes, no cars in the central part of the Medinas, same in Marrakech. And so as a result, you're on foot for a fair bit of the day. That being said, we always move in accordance with how our group generally is. We make sure that there's time to stop for mint tea along the way. But even in the desert, even though, we might ride by camels and so on, it doesn't necessarily require a lot of excess physical stamina. I would say if you're in pretty decent shape, and our rule of thumb is if you can walk a kilometer on your own unaided, then without sitting down kind of a thing, or without having to sit down, then you should be fine for this trip. So that's generally how we look at it. Yeah. So it's moderately strenuous, but not overly strenuous. We also don't go up to any great altitudes. The highest point we cross when we cross the Atlas Mountains is at about 2,100 meters above sea level. So, okay, let's see another question here. Bob asked, who is the wheel and anchor leader? Not sure. It may very well be me, but as it's the end of next year and we have a ton of trips to juggle, I can't answer that just yet. So it could be me, it could be Alfie, it could be Amber, I'm not sure. So as soon as I know, I'll let you know. But one thing I can assure you is whoever it is will be a lot of fun, and we'll make sure that you have a great time. That is the role of our hosts. Good. And I'm just going to answer one other question that wasn't formally asked, because I didn't mention about the weather. What's it like in November? November is a great time to go. The weather typically is in the high teens to low 20s during the day. It can drop. It can be cool, particularly in the desert at night. It could drop down as low as 10 degrees even, maybe even a little bit cooler. But as most of the year, it's really hot. So, from May through until September, October, it's in the 30s. That's why I like November, because you don't need to be too hot when you walk around in Morocco. So, and let's face it, it's also a great time to not be in Canada. So that's about that. And as you can imagine, with all the deserts, it's pretty dry. So rain is not really much of a threat. As a solo traveler, how does that work with the tent in the desert? You get your own tent. So a solo traveler is a solo travel. So you get a single room throughout. And again, you are in a luxury tented camp. You are kind of out in the middle of nowhere. There is security there. So there's no reason for concern. And they obviously have facilities. So you are self-enclosed. Yeah, just think of it like staying in a bungalow or one of those lodges with separate pavilions. Same thing. It's just a tent. So it works just fine. And the feedback I've gotten has been very positive and no concerns from anybody. And I know we do have a lot of solo traveler women in our group. So we make special attention to make sure that you feel comfortable at any time. So terrific. Well, I think that answers all the questions. This is actually the question slide. But if you do think of anything else, let me just see here if there's another one. Do you pair travelers who are solo but like double accommodation? So yes, Sandra, we have a program called Companions for the Road, where we have our solo travelers that want to share, fill in an anonymous questionnaire that we then exchange with others who are on the same trip. And then if two people like the look and feel of somebody who they don't know who it is, then we ask them both if they want to exchange contact information, and we allow them to get in touch with each other and have a conversation and see if they want to travel together. So that's how we do our Companions for the Road program. If you're interested in it, you will find it on our homepage under the heading Community. If you click on that, you'll see Companions for the Road program under solo travelers. So have a look out for that. Good. I think I have answered all the questions, but again, I'm sure there are probably more out there. You'll probably think of one a minute after the webinar is over, but have no fear. We are here to answer all your questions. I appreciate you taking the time to join us today. We had a huge turnout when I look at the number of people. I hope you'll consider Morocco for your future travels. It is a really, really special place, and it's fondly in my memory. And Bob, I'm hoping the one that I'll be the one that's going back. I just can't tell you for sure yet, and I'll let you know soon. So thank you for your time today, and have yourselves a wonderful rest of the day. And we'll catch you on our. I hope you'll see me on the newsletter this weekend, and I'll catch you at our next webinar, which is next Thursday, same time, same place. Take care.